Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be talking about how to set up your terrain inside of Unity before you start modifying it. This is a crucial step that you should never forget, and if you miss it, it could mess up your terrain completely halfway through the project, causing you to start over again from scratch. So, in order to create terrain in Unity, first you need to know where to find it. In Unity 4.3, it's under the Game Object menu, Create Other, Terrain. And that'll give you a basic flat gray piece of terrain that you can modify. Now, from that point, you need to stop and think about exactly what you want to do with your terrain. What exactly is the point of it? How tall is it going to be? How low is it going to be? Etc. In this example on the screen here, you'll see that in my project, I want the lowest bottom under the ocean and the highest mountain peak that a player could walk on to be 100 meters high. The total distance between the lowest low and the highest high is 100 meters. Now, in this video, we're not discussing scale of how big that should actually be. This is an example of how to set up your terrain layer. So, on the right here, you'll see that there's a little gear under the terrain, and that gear button is the settings menu. And down at the bottom, you'll see that we have terrain width, length, and height. The width and length does not matter at this point. That's totally up to you and your project. The height is the important part. Remember, I said I wanted the lowest low and the highest high. I wanted that total distance to be 100. So under terrain height, that's where I put the total distance. Now you'll see that at 0, on the graph here, it is perfectly flat. And at 50, it is perfectly flat. And at 100, it is perfectly flat. Remember, I said the highest high and the lowest low. That means your terrain will not go further than 100 meters if that's what we've set in that terrain height. Okay? So that means the highest your mountains can go, the highest the player can stand on is going to be 100, and the lowest they can stand on is going to be 0 for the terrain. Now, you can move the terrain wherever you want in 3D space. It's always going to maintain that 100 unit distance. So again, in the terrain settings menu, the little gear button in 4.3 of Unity, at the bottom of that there's going to be terrain height, and that's going to be the maximum distance. So the question is, how do you get your terrain to be at the 50 unit number so that your mountains or whatever can be 50 units high and 50 units low? Well, in that case, you're going to go to the second button on the terrain setup here. It's called the Paint Height section. It's going to look like mountains with little plus signs above it. In there, and again, this is Unity 4.3, in there you have a height option and a flatten button. So, if your terrain height in the settings is set to 100, you're more than likely going to split that in half and set the height to 50 and hit the flatten button. And what that will do is that'll move your terrain to 50. Again, it's going to start at 0. So it's going to move it up 50, and then it's going to let you make mountains as high as 50 units and valleys as low as negative 50 units from that 50. Okay? Which will give you a total of 100 units on the height. Now you can flatten it anywhere you want within the 100. Okay, so if you flatten it to 75, then your mountains can only be 25 high, and then they're going to be 75 low. So it depends on how deep you want your water and how high you want your mountains. And this is just a normal terrain example. It does not have to be mountains and water or valleys. How you use terrain is totally up to you. This is just to show you how to set up your terrain. So you're going to create your terrain, which should be created at 000 automatically by Unity, 4.3 that is. Then in the settings, you're going to set the total height overall that you want your terrain to be able to stretch high and low to. Then in the Paint Height section, you're going to flatten it to the middle, or whatever number you want, but most people do the middle so they can split the terrain high and low evenly. Now, the coolest part is, once you've flattened it to wherever you want it to be, if you mess up on the height, let's say instead of 100 you want the height to be 500, you can go back to the settings, set the height to 500, and it will adjust your height flattening to 250 or wherever you put it in between. It'll always adjust that flatten for you automatically. So after you've set this up, all you have to do is adjust the height if you just want to change the height.